Good afternoon, Britannia, and hello to the rest of the world. Welcome to 2CTV. King Charles decided to go to Parliament as tradition and, of course, make his first official speech of his new government led by Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of this new Labour government. And despite all the speculations and rumours that we were going to be getting about 10 to 20 announcements, 20 to 30 announcements, nope. We've received 40 new socialist measures, increasing the size of the government and the state and decreasing the size of individual liberty. All right, so the King's speech is now over. We had the reaction from, of course, Keir Starmer and the leader of the opposition, Rishi Sunak. We already had the media trying to spin the whole thing, saying this is the era of stability. Everything is perfect. 2CTV is here to fix the spin of the corporate media. We're going to give you the summary of the measures and how they're going to be affecting our everyday lives, and how this is actually a blueprint for a number of other Western European countries, and of course even in North America when it comes to the Canadian Liberals and of course the US Democrats. These are the similar policies that are going to be implemented in various countries. When they try it in one place, they then use it as a trial to implement it in other places. Again, this is the whole point of the global consensus that we have in this new globalized world. So, of course, it is His Majesty's government, so the King had to go into Parliament, House of Lords, to make the official announcement and confirmed what we were already expecting, that this is going to be a new socialist era. So, a couple of very important things to mention. When it comes to planning and housing, we do have a housing crisis, but primarily there are a number of issues with it. One is, of course, the population explosion, which is mostly done by mass migration. Of course, that has a massive impact on the housing stock. But there are also local issues that some areas have problems when it comes to the brown belt, green belt, and other areas as well. There have been a lot of debates over the last few years on how to fix this. Instead of fixing mass migration, for example, and controlling it, this new socialist government have made its first announcement to confirm that localism is out of the window. They will be centralizing all powers, a similar policy as Joseph Stalin, and they're going to be doing things. They're going to be ignoring the will of the people on a local level and going to be building without consenting the populace in each area. So more houses are going to come. This will grant the government powers to railroad through planning developments despite local objections. And the Labour government have said that it will unlock economic growth by ignoring the local people, by building in smaller villages and smaller towns to increase them, turn them into cities in the future. So that's number one when it comes to planning issues. They have announced, the King Charles announced that his government under Keir Starmer will be nationalising the railways. For the record, we have a bunch of clowns in the House of Commons because the railways in the United Kingdom are already nationalised. They've been nationalised for decades and decades. The trains and train providers, and somebody has to make the trains and run the trains, they've been, of course, private contractors, private companies. But what they mean, they're not nationalising the railways because it's already nationalised. They are nationalising the train companies. They're taking over the train companies, which means more taxpayers' money is going to be used to buy these companies, and changing the management, the ownership of it. They think that that's going to fix the problem. This is one of those policies where just wait and see how it goes, because it really depends on the culture and the country. In some cultures and countries that are more pro-public sector, like the Scandinavians or the Japanese, it could work. It does work. But in some countries, the culture it's not really pro-public sector culture. That's why when people work against stereotype, but a lot of people who work in public sector, they become complacent, lazy, and there's not enough passion. Not every person in the public sector, but it happens a lot in this country, in America, in France. But so, of course, it's going to be called the Passenger Railway Services Bill that will bring back the trains into public ownership. When it was nationalized before, it didn't work. When it got kind of hybrid privatized, it hasn't worked either. But that's where the issue is, not really who owns it. It's about how you're running it. Changing the ownership is not really the only solution. Now, let's talk about migration. They have They have a plan, ladies and gentlemen. Border security and asylum and immigration bill. The Labour government, the Socialist government, have confirmed that mass migration will continue in the United Kingdom and they will not put a stop to it. They have said that this new bill will be modernising the immigration system. So they simply want to modernise the system, as well as, of course, establishing a new bureaucracy, a new entity using taxpayers' money, increasing the size of the Home Office to work with the French to ask them politely to stop sending illegal migrants to the UK. Of course, it's up to the French to say yes or not, yes or no. But the media are very excited about this. That's why we're here to fix the spin of the media. Mass migration will continue in terms of the small boats. They're creating a new body, a new border command, which means more bureaucrats will have to be recruited we're using taxpayers' money so that they could send them to France and ask them to stop sending their migrants. Small and medium-sized businesses are in trouble, ladies and gentlemen. What the socialists usually do is they sell you an idea using nice words and like compassion, like we care about the working class and this and that, we're going to help you. But there's always the blueprint that you you can see that is about the future and controlling of society. So, for example, they say, we're going to introduce more employment rights. That sounds good. Employment rights, that sounds sexy. Workers. But then when you realize what that actually means is that they're going to create more red tape for small and medium-sized businesses, not big businesses. So the employment rights bill says, many of the people in the establishment are welcoming the government's plans to ban exploitative employment practices. Not a bad idea. But it's a double-edged sword because it will be hammering small and medium-sized businesses and making the job market less competitive and hurting the economy. Basically, the big businesses, corporations, lobbied Keir Starmer, especially in Davos when he went to the World Economic Forum, to say big businesses love red tape. Corporations love regulations because they can get around it. They have expensive lawyers, expensive accountants, and that way, those regulations and red tape will be hurting small, medium-sized businesses and put more cost onto them. And then, of course, the small-sized businesses will not be able to compete with corporations. It's perfect for the corporations, of course. So more paperwork for small and medium-sized businesses. Now, it does get worse in terms of what's happening when it comes to children. There's a couple of bad policies for children. One is they decided to not fully announce it, but it was written. King Charles, when he made the announcement, it was in between the lines that yes, they're going to be increasing taxes on schools, which means that a lot of the families who've been working hard. These are not the rich upper class families. These are upper working class, lower middle class families of children of plumbers, taxi drivers who've been working hard to save, to send them to a good school because, for example, in their area, the state schools, most state schools, but not all, are terrible. And they've been trying to find a way to give a better future to their kids. More taxes are going to be going on these schools, which means those kids will have to be forced to be sent to state schools. And the state schools, there's absolutely no policy to fix the state schools, which means there are not enough spaces and more problems in terms of the future generation when it comes to these kids. There's another problem which we'll talk about when it comes to, actually we can mention it here now, the state will be taking control of children because of the ban, essentially a ban on detransitioning when it comes to the gender bill. We will talk about that properly as well. Okay, the Labour government, the Socialist government came into power saying that we want to be different, we want to reform the system. They are reforming it, but in a woke way. Now, they're going to be actually increasing the size of the House of Lords by adding more female bishops. More female bishops. Because that's what the House of Lords needs at this point. This is the yeah. On the one hand, they say we want to get rid of the House of Lords. And then they say, actually, it might be good if we appoint more people there, as well as, obviously, political people, as well as we need more female bishops from the Church of England. I don't even know what to say about this, but fair enough. More powers have been introduced to be given to Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, as well as Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, another Socialist mayor. So mayors in England will be getting more powers. This is the extension of the devolution plan that Tony Blair started in the obviously late 90s and early 2000s by basically devolving the powers into towards obviously Scotland and Wales and all that and Northern Ireland. But obviously, that didn't really work because they said devolution is about decentralization. That sounded good. Everything they say on paper sounds good. But then when you see the outcome, it's chaotic. So this is not decentralization. They're basically creating secondary centralized powers in London, in Manchester, and elsewhere. This is not good for London. All right, so this is stupid. Some of these policies have been stolen from the Tories, by the way. They... Why? Why are we even doing this? Regulation. So they're going to bring more civil servants and more bureaucrats to take control of football. Football. Sports. Yes. So essentially this is, you could say, nationalization through the back door. What they are going to be doing is this called the Football Governance Bill. This will establish more civil servants and bureaucrats and government agents to ensure that football, it becomes sustainable. Sustainable. By the way, that means a few things. That means more regulation for football clubs, which some people were like, oh, that's good. We need more regulations to tell private football clubs how they should run their own clubs. None of my business. Don't watch football if you don't like it. But then that also includes net zero policies to make sure all football clubs are pro net zero and are sustainable, green, and everything else, and follow the rules and everything else. Basically, it's under the control of government. Even football is under the control of government now. Of course, smoking ban, which has been stolen again from the Conservatives. The tobacco and vapes bill will actually increase the age of people at which people can buy cigarettes. Again, the non-smokers are happy about this, and this is the whole problem, because when individuals will agree with one or two policies because of personal belief, like, oh, I don't like smoking, good, ban it, you are encouraging bad behavior, because you might like this one policy, but by giving consent to big government and big basic politicians to do one thing, slippery slope, they do more things. They do obviously the next thing, which will be affecting you. Today they come for cigarettes, which again we all agree is unhealthy. Cigarettes, we all know that. But if you support these sort of measures, then the next day they'll come for something you like. For example, bacon. Because bacon, and they've already been discussing that, bacon and pizza toppings. Pizza toppings, they would like to, ideally in the future, control how many toppings you can have on a pizza and the size of the pizza. So that's another problem if you support these sort of big government and nanny state measures. The Office for Budget Responsibility, that is part of the state and bureaucrats, and of course they call it independents, but it's still basically bureaucrats, funded by the taxpayer. They are increasing the size of the OBR. The OBR are basically responsible for partly for bringing down Liz Truss's government, whether you like it or not. So they're basically increasing the size of the state, using that as well economically. And finally, let's talk about this stupid thing. And by stupid thing, I don't mean Keir Starmer's face. This is about, of course, the environment and everything else that's been going on in terms of net zero measures. There's going to be the Great British Energy that they're setting up. It's a government-owned net zero company that's job is going to be to bringing you heating and energy in your homes, but it's going to be owned by the government and controlled by the government, and you will have no say in its operation or the pricing. So this is going to be net zero on steroid. They're going to call it the Great British Energy, so that it sounds sexy. The newspaper, The Sun, that came out a couple of weeks ago to endorse the Labour Party in the general election for the first time in a long time, now regrets everything after today. The political editor, Harry Cole, wrote this piece in the Sun saying big government is back. Sir Keir Starmer has wasted no time on sweeping nationalisation and big interventions by the state. The new PM's first King's Speech touches on almost every walk of life, from transport to energy to school uniforms, telling you what to do, and what you can eat, drink or smoke. The government will be telling you how you are supposed to be living your life more than ever before. It's a worrying sign that the first chance he got, the Labour leader announced that he's tearing up realms of the trade union reforms that stopped militants grinding the country to hold at the drop of a hat. So this could also easily backfire on this new socialist government, just like it did back in the 60s and 70s, when you're going to end up having more strikes that will be hitting Keir Starmer's government, because trade unions will have more power to go against the will of their own members. So essentially, if the majority of members don't want to go on strike, they will be forced to by having a minority at the top of the trade unions to call the shots. So the trade unions will be owning the government, will be controlling everything, considering Keir Starmer is nationalising everything left, right and centre, giving more powers to civil servants and the trade unions to be in charge of our everyday lives. They will tell you what you can, as Harry Cole said, what you can eat, what you can drink, what you can wear, especially when it comes to schools. And one of the main problems is going to be, of course, going against detransitioning, which they will be discussing that in the future as well. See what the reaction is from the live chat. Super chat from Stephen, thank you, saying good luck buying off the train owners Corbynomics. They haven't really thought this through. We know that the train situation, the railways, is a mess. But as I said, it's not necessarily because of ownership. Changing ownership from private ownership, which is primarily ordinary people having shares in these companies, so people owning these companies, moving that to government owning it, so actually to Keir Starmer and the civil servants owning the train companies, is not really going to fix the problem of operation and management. You simply need to change the actual operation and management of it, which they can't do. There's a problem because we have a hybrid system. The railways have always been nationalized for decades and decades and decades. The railways are nationalized. Trains who run on the railways, they are private, and the hybrid situation has made it complicated, and that's the whole problem. So now they think if they just do black and white, everything will be controlled by the government instead of people, then they can fix it. But it didn't really work under Stalin, and that was the whole problem with Stalin's economics, because Stalin's economic plan didn't really go too well. Same as Chairman Mao. Chairman Mao's economic plans did not go well. China only came up since the 1990s, when they basically introduced an element of capitalism, but they still called it basically state corporatism, but it's no longer complete communism. Economic policies in China is no longer communism. The politics of it and governance is communist, but not economically, because they realize it doesn't really work, socialism. And the perfect way to see this is the best case studies, especially when it comes to the more regulations on for small and medium-sized businesses in the name of helping workers' rights, employment's rights. Best case studies is Scandinavian countries, Nordic countries. Perfect examples are Norway and Denmark. They know how to do it. It's funny how for decades and decades the political left have been going around saying, oh, those are socialist countries, let's be more like them. They're not socialist countries. They are a market-based economy, and they have, for example, high income tax. But that doesn't mean they are socialists. In fact, a lot of those countries do not have minimum wage as a mandate from the government, because the relationship between non-political trade unions and employers are good. They negotiate between each other, and they have basically unofficial minimum wage per industry anyway. But clearly, we don't want to learn from those guys. Wolf Gaming UK, thank you for your super chat, saying Andy Burnham never did anything for Manchester, the mayor, stopping local housing groups building and letting billion pound companies to do it, raising housing costs. So yeah, long affordable rents. The issue with the price, the cost in terms of for people who want to rent or who want to buy is going to go up and up and up, because while they want to basically stop local democracy, to use civil servants in Westminster to just basically bypass democracy and build everywhere without checking. The issue with that is that they're still going to be continuing, as they have confirmed, they're going to continue mass migration. So the size of population will go up while they are also basically just building a little bit. They're not going to be able to build many houses, not in this country. Again, we're not China. So because of the regulations and health and safety and everything else, it will take years. So that's one of the main problems that we're going to be facing going forward. Now, of course, the problem we have with the system is that while the role of the crown is not symbolic, unlike some other countries, it's constitutional, but the king is above party politics, so he can't really stop the policies, which is a bit of a problem. It is his government, and for years and years, we focused way too much on prime ministers. We are treating prime ministers as if they are the head of state or president, but it is King Charles's government, so he has to take responsibility if it doesn't go well. Just like how he should have taken responsibility for Rishi Sunak's government, but he didn't. Constitutionally, it's his government. Even though he's not involved with party politics, he's definitely involved when it comes to the state of the country and the basically national security and everything else, and the armed forces. But it should be the job of the crown to hold him to account. Again, it doesn't mean necessarily he has to get involved with the discussions around public policy. But there has to be some responsibility, because the whole point of checks and balances is the crown is there to make sure the country doesn't go down. And the crown, that's what we say, the crown, nothing to do with Charles himself as king, because it doesn't matter if you like or dislike the royal family. It's nothing to do with the royal family. It's the crown that matters. The royal family are forced to be in that role. They have no choice. And it's not a job anyway. It's the crown that matters. It's not really the king himself. Just like how, obviously, his mother, it was the crown that mattered, not Elizabeth herself. But again, those days are gone, clearly. Nobody respects the Constitution, so we're in a bit of a mess. And the fact that King Charles himself doesn't really respect the Constitution, clearly. So, but to be fair, since Elizabeth II, they haven't actually followed the Constitution. Because when Elizabeth was young and became queen, people like Winston Churchill were the grown-ups in the room, and they basically controlled her. They just said, Elizabeth, just go around, shake hands, I'll run the country. And when people like Churchill and everybody else started running the country, they became the fathers of the country. That created a bit of a mess, because going forward, that created a bad precedent. The crown has no role. Constitutionally it does, but practically no role. So, for example, while they have to stay out of party politics, the crown should still ask questions, should still have these conversations that he has with the prime minister. He has to say, my role as the crown is to keep the country safe. Explain your policy of mass migration. Because that's not really just party political policy. It's not really about changing the tax rate from 20% to 25%. That will have an impact on the kingdom, mass migration. And it has to be the job of the crown to hold the prime minister to account. The prime minister works for the crown. That's the whole point. The prime minister doesn't work for us. It's His Majesty's prime minister. We do not vote for the prime minister. We never vote for the prime minister. We vote for the party and the MPs. But if the king is not going to do his job, then what are we going to do? Anyway. Castro Trudeau, has been doing this for 9 years. He will be gone next year. The people have finally... Yeah, I mean, at least in Canada, they have some hope. And in the US, of course, with the Donald. In this country, we have to wait for a few more years to see for the next opportunity if people want to bring down this socialist government. The problem with socialism in Western European countries is it's very difficult to reverse policies. That was the problem with Blair. Tony Blair basically wrecked the constitution and just general speaking policies because he introduced them by using good words. Hey, I'm trying to help. I'm nice. But then we haven't actually managed to scrap those policies. It's very hard to reverse it. Unless you have a very radical party getting into parliament, we have had the same government in place since 1997. Since 1997, this country has had the same government, just change different management. That's the whole thing. We've just changed managers. It's the same system. And that was the whole problem. Super chat from Nina saying, shame on those Labour voters at bringing all this mess to us. Again, let's not forget the turnout was also very low compared to previous elections. We could also probably say, shame on those who didn't even bother to come out to vote. So, considering that the turnout was between 50 to 60%, right? Very, very low. Basically, half the country didn't vote. And considering that, I know a lot of people got excited, but Reform UK still managed to get almost 5 million votes, right? if a lot of those other people who didn't vote, if they had come out to vote for reform, or if the Tory was a good Tory party and they voted for Tory, they could have stopped this. But of course, yeah, firstly, who would vote Tory at this time? But again, the state of politics and politicians is a mirror held at the nation itself. People must take responsibility as a collective what is happening in our countries. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Maya Tusi, and we are the media.